Joining us now, Congressman, 9th District, Southwest Virginia, from Salem, Morgan Griffith, Republican. Congressman, it's been too long. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you.
I mean, every couple of weeks we get antsy. We get the shakes. We need what we call our Morgan Griffith fix. So, Congressman, it's good to have you on. You're always trucking the truth. As it just happenstance, one of our listeners talking about this bill, H.R. 367, the Hearing Protection Act of 2017, the bill on the surface deregulates gun silencers, and you just texted me and said you were actually a part of crafting a part of this. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, what you have is a series of bills were put together. It's called the SHARE Act. It talks about protecting our heritage and so forth, and there are a lot of different gun measures inside of the SHARE Act. The Suppressor Bill is one of those. I do support that for reasons that the listeners called in the last segment and said. It's, I think that there have only been two situations where they were used criminally. If you want to criminalize, putting a suppressor on your gun for criminal purposes or make it an enhanced penalty, that's one thing. But if you look at it, there are a lot of people who love to go out and just shoot guns. My 10-year-old, my youngest, won't go out with his buddies and target practice because the noise hurts his ears. And even with the headphones or the Mickey Mouse ear things, I think one of the callers called it, he just doesn't like it because it bothers his ears. And so this would give people who are out shooting guns on a regular basis, doing it as a sport, an opportunity to protect their hearing. That's what that's about. Now, my part of the bill deals with being able to lawfully take your guns across state lines and not face being arrested in certain places. It's almost a cottage industry now in the New Jersey, New York area because there have been cases where, you're flying through and you can legally right now under federal law take your gun from a state that has legal guns to another state or another jurisdiction that has legal guns. But if you happen to get trapped or stopped somewhere along the way, the other states are trying to put you in jail. And so we've had situations where somebody flying through the New Jersey or New York airport, their plane gets delayed. They're told, you have to take your bags to the local hotel and get a plane tomorrow. And when they show back up at the airport, they get arrested for having an illegal gun in that jurisdiction. Now, I think federal law needs to protect that and make sure that, if you're doing everything you're supposed to in compliance with federal law, that, a state or jurisdiction cannot then arrest you when, through no fault of your own, you get delayed. And likewise, we had a situation in a guy was just passing through D.C., and he stopped off to see a doctor of his just as stopping in. And they said, oh, you stopped, therefore you were illegal, and they tried to convict him. Usually lawyers can help people out with those things, but why should people have to spend $10,000 to do what is already legal?
Right, so it was only because he stopped. So if he just passed through D.C., that would have been fine, but because he stopped to see his doctor and he had a firearm that's legal in Virginia, not legal in D.C., he gets arrested. It's crazy.
That's right, even though he had complied with all the federal regulations for transporting the gun. So, the ammo and the weapon weren't in the same location. It was in a container as it was supposed to be. Everything was in accordance with federal transport laws. But, because he stopped, he got charged.
It's unbelievable. Your legislation would eliminate that, right?
It would, and it would actually make the jurisdiction bringing the erroneous charge have to pay the legal bill, because that's the problem, is that even if you ultimately get off, right now you're spending $10,000 just to defend your gun rights.
That's just insane. Absolutely insane. Makes no sense. So it sounds like on this silencer bill that you basically back that too, because as the callers were saying, it's really about suppressing the noise, and it is what the NRA is saying it is, which is, it is tough for people that have sensitive ears or whatever. It's just too loud. And so the $200 fee that you have to pay doesn't make any sense. And so it sounds like from yourself and some of our callers, this makes more sense than it did on the surface when people that don't understand the gun industry just look at it, right?
That's correct. And they just think it's, the type of suppressor or silencer that they had in the movies where, that's what the criminals were using, and their only purpose for it was for criminal use. And I'm not going to say there won't be somebody who will use it criminally, but, people use all kinds of things criminally. I once was sitting in the courtroom when there was a case where a lady was charged with malicious wounding because she took an aquarium. It was empty. She took an aquarium and bashed it over her boyfriend's head. And it broke and cut him up pretty bad. So, people are going to do bad things. What we have to try to do is to make reasonable laws that don't punish those who are law-abiding. At the same time, do the best we can, never going to be perfect, to protect the public.
All right, I think that's the way to go. We're with Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican, Southwest Virginia, represents the 9th District of Virginia. He's from Salem. Congressman Griffith, let's get to Trump's tax reform bill. I guess you would call it the president's tax reform bill now because they're driving the process. You've seen not all the detail, but a lot of it. It's going to get flushed out in the committees. What's your overall reaction to it? And on the surface, something that you see now, is it something you're able to back?
Well, what we've got right now is a framework, and then we have to fill in the inside parts. As Mark Meadows likes to say, what we've done now is we've done the outside of the picture puzzle, and now we have to fill the rest of it in. But based on the framework and based on the goals of where we're trying to go, I'm in complete support of those efforts. And unless they do something crazy, I'll be supporting it.
What do you think of the provisions? And I can tell you for a fact, this is a Trump hill to die on. Taking away the state tax deduction. That seems to be a big thing for some Republicans in the high tax states like California, New Jersey, New York, etc. And the president's position is, look, the federal government is subsidizing high tax policies in these states, and we're going to get out of that business. You pay the tax, or move out of the state, or get people into reduce spending. Is that something, can you live with the elimination of the state income and sales tax to get rid of that deduction? Can you live with that?
I can. I mean, it is not fair to make the citizens in the lower tax states pay for the excesses of the higher tax states, and this is one way to do it. And I would think Democrats would love this provision because, in essence, it gets to people who have the money. They're always talking about, we're trying to, as Republicans, they claim, incorrectly, but they claim that we're trying to, tax the poor and give to the rich. Well, this is a classic example where the people who are paying the most of these property taxes, et cetera, are actually the people who have more money. And so, this is, if I were a Democrat, I'd say this is a way to, make the rich pay more. But as a Republican, I can easily look at it and say we're right now underwriting expensive states who have some crazy policies, who spend money like it's going out of style, unlike states, and Virginia's in the middle of the pack, but there's a lot of states that are low-tax states, and their citizens are having to pay for New York and California to do all those things that those folks want to do. Well, if they want to do it, that's fine, but they ought to pay for it themselves and not expect us to pay for it.
So, look, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I happen to love this provision because Trump is right when he says basically the federal government is subsidizing high-tax states because the highest income earners that are the donors to the politicians that raise the taxes in these states, they can take the big deduction, and it doesn't mean that much for average people. But so I think I'm in total agreement with this. Now, look, you couldn't get the repeal passed, right, because many of your colleagues went back to their districts and lied to their constituents. You're not one of them, but many did. So you couldn't get that passed. Are you confident that the House is going to pass comprehensive tax reform by Christmas? I mean, so far, it's not gotten the committees. We don't have markup. I look at a schedule, and I'm saying there's no way you're going to get this done by the end of December. Is that even possible now?
I think it is, but I will put
Why?
the qualifier in it that you put in it. Do I expect the House will get it done? Yes, I do. Now, can I speak for the Senate? No, I'm so disappointed with their actions in relationship to repeal and replace. And frankly, I can't predict anything that the Senate will do because I'm not even sure they know how to govern. And I hate to say that. I have some friends over on the Senate side, but as a body, we got a repeal and replace bill passed that would have stabilized the markets, that would have started. It would have taken a couple of years, but would have started to control the increases in your health insurance. And the Senate couldn't even get the skinny bill across the finish line. It's very disturbing and troubling. And so I expect the House will get a tax bill passed. Stay tuned. We'll see if the Senate can do anything.
Well, let's see if they can finally get something done. And now, how does the 60-vote cloture rule come in? Does that, to get tax reform done, do they have to get 60 votes?
They do not.
They never give me a straight answer.
We're going to pass a budget bill later this week.
Right.
We've already passed our appropriations bill, so the budget bill is a blueprint for the appropriations bill. So the only reason to pass the budget bill, and the reason I'm going to vote for it, is to have a vehicle to do tax reform on in reconciliation that will then only require 50 votes plus the vice president.
But you have to pass that to get to the 50, right?
That is correct, yes.
Do you have the votes in the House to pass that now?
Yes, we do.
All right. So therefore, to get whatever the final Trump tax reform plan, which I think, Congressman, I agree with the president here. I mean, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, right? You're not going to get any Democratic votes. I don't care what they say. The only bipartisan that you ever have is when Republicans cave and go with the Democrats. There's never a Democratic bipartisanship. They're all going to vote against it. They're going to use the same talking points they always do. It's a tax cut for the rich. It's racist. People will die. Schools will close. Nobody will get breakfast. I mean, it's so boring. I can predict it, right? And Schumer started it the other day. But it would seem to me that if you can get to 50 in the Senate, then only two people can vote no on the Republican side. So we'll see how that plays out. Couple more minutes. We're with Congressman, Republican from the 9th District, Morgan Griffith. Congressman, Puerto Rico, the Trump administration getting criticized, saying that their efforts in Puerto Rico are not sufficient for the response to Hurricane Maria. Yet you look at the reality on the ground. I mean, they got 10,000 troops. They got a 3-star general. They temporarily repealed the Jones Act. They've got food and water. They've got supplies coming in. 66 of 70 hospitals are up. 60% of gas stations are up. Do you think the response has been adequate, inadequate? What's your opinion on it?
It's always hard to put terms of adequate or inadequate on it. If you are or have a loved one who's down there and you can't get airplanes in yet and there's no power, it doesn't matter how great the effort is, it's going to seem inadequate. And that's one of the dilemmas that the administration has. You are dealing with an island. You're dealing with an island who, through their government, did not harden. Look, should we be helping them? Yes, we should. But they didn't harden their infrastructure like their power grids. We're going to learn a lot from this situation and hopefully translate it to the rest of the country. But I think under the circumstances, the administration is doing a decent job. But again, if you've got family members down there, you're never going to think it's enough until your family member is safe and secure in a dry place with food, water, and electricity. And right now, there are a lot of people you can't reach by phone. You can't get airplanes in yet effectively. And so it's really tough, and I feel for the folks down there. It was a big storm followed on or preceded by another big storm, and it's a tough terrain.
Final question, Congressman. Yesterday, the House passing a bill that would ban abortions after 20 weeks. The bill that was sponsored, I think, by Trent Franks in somewhere in the West, Arizona, maybe. Sound familiar?
That's correct.
Arizona.
Yes,
he said that the bill says it's a crime to perform or attempt an abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy with the possibility of a fine or up to time in prison. The measure passed 237-189, basically along party lines. 20 weeks, that's a baby. Look, I'm pro-life and all that, and I get the other side of the argument, but 20 weeks, that's a living, breathing child in there. I know you voted for this. What was your take on it?
Well, it was really interesting, and science is pushing that date back further and further when a child can be viable. And we heard discussion of a child that was born premature, the size of a M&M package, at 20 weeks and lived. And this is not that uncommon. I have a friend whose kids were born prematurely at 22, and they're, I think, 10 years old now, maybe 11. And so, science is moving this back. It's fantastic. We can save more lives. We shouldn't be throwing those lives away just because somebody finds it inconvenient. And I know lots of people who are willing to adopt these babies if the natural parents don't want them.
Congressman, what happens to this now, this bill?
Well, goes over to the Senate, and let's see if they can do anything.
And do they need 50 votes, or do they need 60?
They would need, under their rules, 60 votes. Now, the Constitution would only require that they have a majority, but their rules require 60.
So everybody knows what this means. I mean, this is a bill that basically says you can't perform an abortion after 20 weeks when the child is basically 5 months old. That's a living, breathing child. I mean, well, it's not breathing, but it's, everything is there. All the science shows it. So it's going to get to the Senate, and Mitch McConnell is going to say in a month or so, or 3 weeks, that he doesn't have the 60 votes. And so it will never come up, and it'll never get voted on. It just does. Instead,
that is the likely scenario.
That is the likely scenario. And my point to this whole thing is debate it. I mean, debate it. They'll never even debate it. They don't want to debate it because they don't want to go on the record. This is the thing. They don't want to go on the record in voting one way or the other. And the Constitution says they need a simple majority. So if 51 senators want to vote no, then they have to go on the record. And McConnell doesn't want to go on the record. And if Schumer was the majority leader, he wouldn't want to go on the record either. It doesn't matter who it is. Reid, doesn't matter who it is. They don't want to go on the record. But yet that's their only job, is to go on the record. It's amazing to me that we allow this to continue on, and they make all this money, and people come out millionaires, and they don't even do their simple job, which is to go on the record, debate an issue, and take a vote. I mean, if you're in the Senate, your only job is to take votes. What else is your job? I don't know what it is. To take votes, right? It's frustrating.
Well, that's your primary job. A lot of people think that, there are other things you're supposed to do, and you are. But the primary job of being in the legislature is to take votes on the tough issues and to make the tough decisions and to try to explain those votes to your folks back home so that you can educate them on your position. And if they don't like it, they get rid of you. And that's the way it's supposed to work in a democratic republic that we have. And the Senate rules are an abomination and are counter to what our founding fathers set forward. And, I have no problem with the historic filibuster, where it actually took 66 votes to stop you from talking on the floor, but you had to be there on the floor. Now they put in a hold, and they go off and have a steak dinner, go watch their kids play soccer, do anything except vote, or stand on the floor and explain their position to the American people. I'm happy with either one. Vote or be on the floor telling the American people why it is you think we shouldn't be voting.
Congressman, you are so right, and maybe one day we'll change it, but certainly isn't going to be in this particular cycle. And so that everybody knows the reason they do it is so they don't have to go on the record and they can continue to raise money from all sides. That's the issue. Congressman, I'm out of time. I really want to thank you for being with us. Congressman Morgan Griffith. More information, griffith.house.gov. Congressman, thank you for being with us, sir. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you. Talk to you soon.